Okay. A lot of people say, some say I'm a Trinidadian, some say I'm a Grenadian, but I am from Washington, D.C. A lot of people say my name is Wizard. Others say it is Elwin McQuilkin. But my name is the IMF. All your third world countries, you really feeling this squeeze. Only empty treasuries and bankrupt economies. You can balance your budget, you're riddled with foreign debt. I don't mind any loan I'll give to you. Once you keep in line and do as I say to do. Anything you nationalize, just be prepared to privatize. If you really want my money, devalue the currency. Like HFL's government, institute retrenchment. And to your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. Lumbo lumba dajai. Look what I do Guyana and also Jamaica. Now I have you Trinidad, I will really hit you hard. You had so much oil money, now you run into me. I don't mind any loan I'll give to you. Once you keep in line and do as I say to do. Anything I tell you obey. Like to cut public workers' pay. If you really want my money, remove all the subsidies. You could kill one another, like in Venezuela. To your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. Just ask Mr. Boodoo, and he's going to tell you. I ain't give a single thing about people suffering. For your economic ills, you just swallow my pills. I don't mind any loan I'll give to you. Once you keep in line and do as I say to do. You got to cut your social programs. You got to manage them trade unions. If you really want my money, no left ideology. In the United Nations, watch your voting patterns. But to your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. Dumba die 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 die. Tamba da bam bam die. Since the days of slavery, you built my big cities. You took your independence, thinking that you would advance. But consumer societies is what you will always be. I don't mind any loan I'll give to you. Once you keep in line and do as I say to do. But a man without a debate, you got to increase the interest rates. If you really want my money, my motto is austerity. The people could riot. Who the hell care about that? And to your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. One love tonight. Black fella. To your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. Just ask Mr. Voodoo, and he's going to tell you I ain't give a single thing about people suffering. For your economic ills, you just swallow my pills. I don't mind any loan I'll give to you. Once you keep in line and do as I say to do, you got to cut your social programs. You got to manage them trade unions. If you really want my money, no left ideology. In the United Nations, watch your voting patterns. Cause your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. Don't die, 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 die. Bam, 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 bam. Since the days of slavery, you built my big cities. You took your independence, thinking that you would advance. But consumer societies is what you will always be. I don't mind any loan I'll give to you. Once you keep in line and do as I say to do. But a man without a debate, you got to increase the interest rates. If you really want my money, my motto is austerity. The people could riot. Who the hell care about that? And your Christ for mercy, I'm deaf. Because I am the IMF. One love tonight. Easy.
Oh, yes, the Black Wizard, the Black Wizard of Grenada. I am the IMF. I am the IMF. Um, quite a song. I am the IMF. Uh, Wherever you join us from, welcome to welcome to Politics 101. It's a Thursday afternoon. We are going to um, we're going to be doing election watch tonight. Vincent Alexander is going to be here, and he will give us the latest on the election preparation scene, what's happening at GCOM. The last time Vincent was here, he alerted us to a lot of stuff that was happening, and we expect him tonight to give up the latest. Give us the latest. Give us the latest. We know that the PPP is busy trying to put their ducks in line, trying to pull off another what they did in 2020. And of course, we have to be as vigilant as we can. So Vincent is going to be here in a couple of minutes to give us the lowdown. Please share the link. Let everybody know that we are here. We came in, of course, with a song of the Black Wizard out of Grenada, the IMF. So Vincent Alexander is going to be here shortly. I'm getting news that they are displacing some people in Mocha. Another displacement. I just got a note here. I have not been monitoring what's happening all day. Was in the classroom most of the day. So I am now hearing, here, and see exactly those of you who have been following. I suppose I Are you aware of the displacement of a new group of people in Moko under the pretext of laying electrical service pipes? Ah, I was trying to get on to Nima Flubes, who is the member of parliament there, and I understand that she is meeting with the affected people. We'll cover that. We'll see. We'll see if we can get on to her before the end of the program. But Vincent Alexander is going to be here, and we'll be doing some election watch, and Vincent is going to bring us up to date. Good evening to all of you, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Politics 101. Welcome to Politics 101. It's a Thursday evening, wherever you're joining us from, whether you're joining us from the United States of America, or you're joining us from inside of Guyana, or you're joining us from our Caribbean. Welcome to Politics 101. Those of you who are joining us from farther afield, whether it is out there in Europe, those of you who are joining us from England, France, please share the live, share the link, and let everyone know. Vincent is going to be here to update us on what's happening on the election scene. As I said, we're getting news that they are displacing some other people there in Moko. We don't know how true it is. I've been trying to verify this, but have not been able to do so as yet. But we are going to be following that story. Vincent Alexander will be here shortly, so we will talk about elections. Let's take a little musical break again, and then when we come back, Vincent Alexander.
Let me go. Whenever David Rosie come to me, only recently with a sad story. Didn't pay attention, I didn't want to hear, because I done and I'm finding me own affair. But when he tell me the doctor gone back in power on the 5th of October, in the grave I started to shiver. But when he tell me Mr. Desmond agreed to all of the doctor plan, so I come tonight to tell Desmond where you wrong. Look, I hear you fight the election as a clean and decent man. That's you wrong. That's you wrong. And the Jacob left the commission to the Collins Coyote plan. That's you wrong. That's you wrong. But as president of the land, you failed to set up a battle plan. That is why you can't. That's you can't. Want to be a veteran in politics, you gotta be smart, and have plenty tricks. Never put all your confidence in your fellow man, especially when you're fighting an election. I hear they say that the doctor tell you to bring up Zorba, and so from America you bring Mr. Carter. But listen, brother Debbie, you should have never ever agree. You could have come and let me advise you properly. The observers from overseas, you bring to scrutinize Guyanese. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. Anywhere they send Mr. Carter, the opposition take over. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. But as president of the land, you fail to shut up about the land. That is why you're gone. They say you're gone. There we go. So many years, you know, I used to sanction to everyone throughout the curriculum. If a leader wants to stay in position, he must never think but a free and fair election. We know that the doctor wanted to get in power with everything in favor, confusing the leader election. They went president instead of voting for PNC. He so confused that he voted for the PPP. I heard the ballot had to be counting at the place of poll in the evening. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. On the night before the election, the list was still in confusion. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. But as president of the land, you failed to shut up about the plan. That is why you're gone. They say you're gone. Alive? And I'm hiding the own. But when he tell me the doctor gone back in power on the 5th of October, in the grave I started to shiver. But when he tell me Mr. Desmond agreed to all of the doctor plan, so I come tonight to tell Desmond where you wrong. Look, I hear you fight the election as a clean and decent man. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. And the Jacob left the commission to the college coyote plan. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. But as president of the land, you failed to set up a battle plan. That is why you're gone. They say you're gone. Want to be a veteran in politics, you gotta be smart and have plenty tricks. Never put all your confidence in your fellow man, especially when you're fighting an election. I hear they say that the doctor tell you to bring up Zorba, and so from America you bring Mr. Carter. But listen, brother Debbie, you should have never ever agree. You could have come and let me advise you properly. The observers from overseas, you bring to scrutinize Guyanese. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. Anywhere they send Mr. Carter, the opposition take over. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. But as president of the land, you fail to shut up about the land. That is why you're gone, gone, gone. They say you're gone. There we go. So many years, you know, I used to sanction to everyone throughout the CARICOM. If a leader wants to stay in position, he must never think for the free and fair election. We know that the doctor wanted to get in power with everything in favor, confusing the leader election. They went presidency instead of voting for PNC. He so confused that he voted for the PPP. I heard the ballot had to be counting at the place of poll in the evening. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. On the night before the election, the list was still in confusion. They say you're wrong. They say you're wrong. But as president of the land, you failed to shut up about the plan. That is why you're gone, gone, gone. They say you're gone. Alive? I couldn't get a sing at all for the crown. They didn't want me to sing just because I feel they would win. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. But if the judging is fair and square, I gonna beat them again this year. They don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. Still they tell me sing something. Rebel sing something. I like sing something. Let me hear you sing. They want me to jam something. Come on and jam something. Jam, jam, jam something. All the time they telling me something. 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 Jam something. 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 They tell me to jam, jam, jam something.
This is my second trip back to MASH, and believe me, I'm having a whale of a time this time.
Happy March Month to everybody.
It's the only thing that will bring me together.
There you go. I was muted. The Mighty Rebel coming in there with Desi You're Wrong, 1993, taking us back to the 1992 election, the Calypsonian there, making fun of Desmond Hoyt. There was a strong, a strong opinion in some circles that Hoyt should not have given in to the demands of the opposition. And there were shades of that in 2020 when there, and still is, the criticism of President Granger for throwing in the towel. doing it as the Calypsonians always do it. Welcome. And Vincent Alexander is here, so we're going to get right in to the interview. But please share the link. Please share the link. Please share the live. Vincent, good evening.
Good evening, David. Good evening.
It's good to have you again. We want to talk about a number of issues tonight. We want to start, however, with election, a kind of election watch, election preparation. Of course, we read in the media that GCOM has increased its meetings from once a week to twice a week. And getting ready, and there is still a lot of doubts about the election system. The last time you were here, you were alerting us to some things that were happening. One of the things you did alert us to was that people were coming over from Suriname and registering, taking advantage of the list that is still not sorted out and not satisfactory to all of us. Give us a sense of what's happening. What's the latest on the election scene there?
Well, since I last appeared on this program, not much has changed, nor has there been an escalation of what I referenced on that occasion, except that there is a tendency of some to try to push the narrative that GCOM is specifically preparing for an election. That is not true. GCOM is doing its normal work. That should put it into a state of preparedness if an election is called. We have not initiated activities that are peculiar or specific to a particular election. You know, when you have elections, there are some things that you have to do within a certain time frame to make the election possible. Like, for example, you have to have the candidates' names submitted by a certain time so that you can have the printing of the ballots by a certain time with the names of the candidates and so on. Those things are not things that we are engaging in at this time. We are engaging in the normal, continuous registration process that will put us in a position, if an election is called, we can deliver it by a certain time and do those things within that time frame that are necessary for the holding of the elections. But there seem to be some people who want to give the public the impression that what GCOM is doing is specifically preparing for the elections, and therefore creating the impression that you're going to have an election around the corner. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to have one around the corner. I don't envisage that, given where we're at in our normal work, and given that elections have not been announced, that we can have an election in 2024. I doubt whether that can, in fact, happen. Having said that, the fact that GCOM is doing meeting twice a week now is not in itself an indication of ramping up its preparedness for elections. There are a number of things that GCOM should have done already in the normal course of things that were not being done. And what we have advocated for is to increase the number of meetings and to create a priority list of the things which we need to do and to get those things done. Election or no election, those are things which we ought to get done. So, for example, at the top of our list is the filling of vacancies. We have had vacancies that have been there for close to 3 years. And so at the top of our list in these meetings twice a week is the filling of vacancies. At the second on our list is the question of biometrics, something that has been bandied about for some time. That discussion on that is the second item on our list. And there are 13 such items. These items are not items that are peculiar to election 2025. These items have to do with things that GCOM ought to have done already. And because we have not done them, we have articulated the need for a more urgent approach to these matters. And as a consequence of that, we are now meeting Tuesdays and Thursdays. And even in the face of that list of priorities, our first Tuesday and Thursday meetings did not, in fact, address those issues because the administration threw at us at rather short notice the budget, which they have to submit in a matter of 2 days into the Ministry of Finance. And this is the normal annual process. And what we had to do was to dedicate Tuesday and Thursday of this week specifically to the budget. Indeed, the budget does include estimates for elections because elections are due in 2025, and the budget we are preparing is the 25 elections. So budget is included in those estimates because in 2024 there was no provision in the estimate election since it is not a normal election year. So today and Tuesday we dedicated time specifically to the budget, and hopefully we'll get back to our 13 items when you meet next week. So the public should understand, yes, GCOM is involved in certain activities. Right now we have started another registration, cycle of registration. And this is an ongoing process across the years, irrespective of elections. And we have, in fact, issued a voters list, which we should be doing every 6 months, the normal course of things. And what's of interest in terms of that new voters list is that now we are somewhere in the vicinity, I think the number is 767 or 76,000 persons are now on our voters list. A matter of grave concern, but that's what the number is after the last cycle of continuous registration.
Wow. Wow. 700 and something. That sounds to me almost like the population of Guyana or maybe more than the population of Guyana.
Well, there are those of us who said if we continued along the way we were going, it would get there. And it has in fact now gotten there.
Wow, 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 wow. How can you tell the world that you have a voters list that is equivalent to your population when only the adult population, 18 years and over, could vote? Vincent, I mean, we all know, and I'm sure the audience here know that the court has said you can't take people off the list so long as they are Guyanese citizens and so on. We all know that. But isn't GCOM, and I'm going back to 2020, where the court said to GCOM, when Mr. Hollander is Hollander, I think his name was, went before the court and said he sees some problems at GCOM, and the court in fact said GCOM can correct certain problems. Cannot GCOM, and because my head is spinning, Vincent, yes, the court has said you can't do this, but GCOM is tasked with ensuring that there is a credible election. All right? GCOM, according to the court, could do certain things to ensure that there's a free election. In fact, some people felt that GCOM went overboard in 2020. Why is GCOM not being able to fix what I would refer to as a basic problem? You have some background in law and you background in politics. Tell me what's happening here.
The fact of the matter is that GCOM, as presently configured, has all intents and purposes, two sides and an arbiter. And the arbiter has, in the main, cast a vote or given an opinion in concurrence with one side. It is clear that the People's Progressive Party has no interest in addressing the matters that ought to be addressed and have mounted, along with some other people, that we have a good system of checks and balances. And even as they now admit that the number is a huge number, their contention is with the checks and balances, then there is no room for impersonation or fraudulent voting. And so there is no effort on their part to address the issue, which is undeniable. That is, that our voters list is in excess of the number of persons who should really be on that list. And that we do not have a mechanism for the exclusion or the deletion of the persons who died overseas. And you would have had from 2008 to present hundreds of thousands, I would presume, of Guyanese who died overseas. And therefore, the list still has those names and is a significant contributor to what we call the bloated list. But there is absolutely no appetite on behalf of the People's Progressive Party to correct that. And given the configuration of GCOM and the manner of voting, then little is being done to correct that. So for me, this becomes a significant political problem because the way GCOM is configured, there's little or no hope for a resolution of those problems in GCOM. We're still to see what will be the outcome of the discussions on biometrics. As I said, on the list of things to be discussed, biometrics is number 2 on that list. So we're still to see what's the outcome of that. And there are those who may now argue, well, you're discussing biometrics, so don't be preemptive. But indications in the past have been little or no support for biometrics, particularly at the place of poll.
Of polling.
We do have a conundrum that is largely political, in my humble opinion, requires political action if there's to be a solution.
Vincent, prior to the last election, GCOM had begun house-to-house registration, and that was halted at some point. Take us back there and tell us what was happening there. First of all, how GCOM came about starting house-to-house registration, and then why it was stopped.
When GCOM introduced continuous registration, there was a discussion as to how we can make sure our list is continuously also sanitized. And in the course of those discussions, we came to the conclusion that at least every 7 years, we should do a house-to-house registration that will provide for us to start from ground zero. In that regard, in 2016, 2017, I think, GCOM requested of the government the monies to do the house-to-house registration, and they were not granted. Those monies were granted in the 2018 approval for 2019. And the process started in 2019. There was no objection by anyone. There was a concurrence of everyone. Everyone means the parliament by virtue of the allocation of the monies. And GCOM itself, by virtue of the request for those monies and the initiation of the exercise. But then came the motion in Parliament, no confidence motion, and a mad rush. Sequence of that mad rush, as a consequence of that mad rush, it was contended that we could not continue the house registration exercise. And in pursuit of that, the matter was taken to court of what that exercise would actually do, and that was to start from ground zero in terms of constructing a list. And the court ruled that you could not take anyone's name off of the list. It therefore did not make sense to continue the exercise because the objective of the exercise was not overruled by the court. And so we went to the normal process of claims and objections, retaining the list on the grounds that GCOM could not, in fact, go to ground zero, which we were going to go to before the court ruled, and which no one had objected to before the no confidence motion. But the rush to have an election in the face of the no confidence motion seemed to have influenced people to do whatever could be done to have those elections as quickly as possible. And one of the things that they thought they had to do was to make sure we didn't have house registration, because that would not have enabled elections as quickly as they would have wanted it. So you have a situation where interest and convenience trumped what GCOM had in principle previously agreed to. And that is where we are still at, where influence and convenience are trumping what GCOM would have agreed to in the past. And that trumping is now also accompanied by a ruling of the court. Because even in the face of the court's ruling, there are some things that can possibly still be done. For example, the regulations, national registration regulation, I think is regulation 40, provides for the chief immigration officer to provide GCOM in the person of the chief registration officer with the names of the persons who would have left the country and not returned over an extended period. That would at minimum, give us a figure of the number of persons on the list who are not in the country and therefore are not likely to turn out to vote. In that regard, in 2015 elections, I had made a proposition that we could use that list and highlight those names so that it could be some higher level of vigilance at the polling station if persons turned up to vote on those names. That was jettisoned in 2015 and has not been brought back onto the table up to this point in time. So you see again, persons probably have an interest in even that not happening. One of the issues to be discussed in the list of 13, in fact, is the issue of the methodology for taking the names of the deceased persons off of the list. And I envisage that we will have a serious discussion, though probably lopsided, in relation to how we can advance the process of taking the overseas dead off of the list. There's a way in which that could be done, in my humble opinion. And we can even advance this argument that we could highlight those names because the information can be legally made available. Highlighting the names can help us in our vigilance at elections.
Vincent, one last question before we go off this topic. You had been clamoring for an internal investigation, an internal assessment by GCOM of the 2020 election. An internal assessment. This is not a commission of inquiry or anything like that. And GCOM has been resisting that. And so there was no official internal assessment of what has happened in the election. But, I mean, sometimes these things happen in ways that you did not intend them to happen. Has there been any indirect? I mean, clearly there's no direct assessment of what happened at the last election. Has there been any indirect assessment, any indirect things that GCOM has done that one could call some kind of assessment of what happened at the last election?
GCOM as a body has not done any such assessment. All that has been done as an initiative of the government, where they have identified what they consider to be areas that need attention. And they have followed through on that by virtue of legislative provisions that seek, in the main, to prosecute and probably to prosecute GCOM officials with heavy fines if they do things, even if those things are not done intentionally.
Right.
That has another negative impact. And so there have been changes in the legislation of the Representation of the People's Act. But these changes have occurred essentially at the behest of the government. GCOM did not make any real contribution to those changes, as well as to the changes in the National Registration Act. But we see that in the National Registration Act, for example, it is now clear that in the process of registration, we do not have to identify the registrant at the place of residence. We merely have to verify that the registrant approached us for registration and that the address given is an address that does exist. That is highly contradictory because our list is a list not only for national elections, it's also a list for local government elections. And the legislation for those elections, in terms of the people who are candidates, and even the people who are going to vote, ties them to a place of residence. And you can't determine the place of residence merely by an address. You have to be able to identify the person does in fact exist there. So there are contradictions even in what has been done, but GCOM has refused to do a review and has contended that in the face of the petition and things like that, that a review should not be done and has not been done. We did call for a review, and we did specify that we were not calling for a review to point fingers at individuals for wrongdoing, which the courts can do and are trying to do, but that we wanted a review so we could identify flaws in the system, to rectify those so we can make our system more acceptable in terms of providing for free, fair, and transparent elections. That has been resisted, whilst some things have been done, both in terms of the National Registration Act, the Representation of the People's Act, and I dare say that other things have been done in relation to the births and deaths provisions, which impact GCOM, none of which addresses the issues that are there to be addressed Because if we have documentation that shows that, in fact, people would have voted who were not in the country at the time, then that has to be a matter that should be addressed. But we have an attorney general who turns up, quarantines all of the reports that the APNU AFC submitted on that matter, and for 2 years has gone silent. When he has at his disposal a machinery to determine the correctness and the accuracy of the APNU AFC's accusation, whilst they also ignore that the early reports had been sent to the chief immigration officer and a determination at that level had been made, which shows that 75% of those whose names were submitted to scrutiny, in fact, were out of the country. One can only come to the conclusion that there are those who have an interest in those things not being done, as much as they have an interest in the things which they have done, things which have not been done in terms of a national consensus, because the opposition parties did not support, they simply use one person majority to impose on this country their views. I say that in the face of their contention that there were consultations. Those consultations were a charade. I attended one. I, if the consultations was for 2 hours, the Attorney General spoke for 75% of the 2 hours. And even in the instance where I sought an opportunity to make a second intervention, that was not granted because time was of the essence. And so the consultations, in my view, were a charade and are no basis for saying there's legitimacy in the legislation which was passed by a one party, one seat majority.
Vincent, you mentioned that 75% of the sampler that you sent to the chief immigration officer, the sampler that you sent, 75% were flagged as people who voted but were not in the country on that day. One of the things that some people are arguing is that even if they were irregularities, they were not enough to change the course of the election. Now, bearing in mind that the election was decided by a one-seat majority for the government side, how does that line up? How does that argument that even if there were irregularities, they could not affect the outcome of the election, how does that line up? That one-seat majority that the government was declared a winner line up with a sample that you sent, GCOM sent, that says 75% of the sample were not here. And I understand that there were other samplers that you all had that you didn't get to send to the immigration. Speak to that issue for me, please.
Let's be clear, first of all, with the other samples.
Right.
APNU AFC, I don't call those samples, I call them factual evidence.
Factual evidence.
APNU AFC sent, I think, all that they had. It is GCOM that did not send all to the chief immigration officer. The APNU AFC sent. It is the AG that has corralled, quarantined the unsent. And it has gone silent about them. He actually went to the court to get the court to command the GCOM, which was the custodian of those documents, though they had not sent them, to hand them over to the Attorney General. That was done. And ever since then, he's been patently silent. So the Lord knows, only the Lord knows why he would command us to make the documents available and then make no use of them or no known use of them. So that's the first point I want to make. Second point I want to make, the issue of the one-seat majority and the fact that given all that occurred, there were well-raised questions about the results is not restricted to the information provided by APNU, AFC to the commission, because we had a situation on the East Coast,
East Coast, yes.
on the East Coast, where the number of votes that could not be verified based on the absence of the uh, accompanying document
Statutory documents.
is a sufficient number to, to impact the final results of the elections. It is a sufficient number. If I'm not mistaken, and I have a document here which has to do with my own presentation, the number of ballots involved on the East Coast was 11,566 in 47 boxes. 11,566. The value of a seat is approximately uh,
5,000.
5,000.
Yes.
So that if you have in question 11,566 votes and a difference in the results by one seat, then this 11,566 can in fact impact final results. It is for that reason that I presented to the Commission a document entitled General and Regional Elections 2020, the case for non-declaration. A document which I have since made available to the public. It should be found in the library, both the university library and the public library. And in that document, my conclusion was as follows. Given the pillars on which my submission to the commission was premised, that no voter should be disenfranchised and only valid votes should be counted, I can only reiterate my contention that the only resolution to the problem is for a non-declaration and a new process that reforms the enfranchisement of all and negates the impact of fraudulent elections. What in fact I eventually called for was a by-election
By election, yes.
on the East Coast, because no one was contesting the other results. And so a by-election in the East Coast would have provided an opportunity for GCOM to be sure all the persons who voted were in fact persons who were eligible to vote. We would have had a far more uh, alert system in those by-elections. And so what we would have done is ensure that we don't do something that disenfranchises people, which one can contend may have been a part of what the CEO's recommendation led to. Because what the CEO did, he looked at those votes and in some regards said, we're not going to count those.
Right, right.
My argument is that among those votes, there must have been persons who voted. Not to count them, is to disenfranchise those persons.
Right.
And therefore, the better thing to do is to hold a by-election and allow everyone to exercise his or her franchise, whilst you seek to ensure that there's no one who casts or whom a vote is cast who is not entitled to vote. So yes, there has to be significant question mark over those results, given what occurred on these schools. My other contention is this, that what occurred in these schools, everyone accepts that we have problems in terms of that. However, it was contended that those are issues for a petition. My view is different. My view is that the legislation that speaks to petition could never have intended that if wrongdoings, fraudulence, was identified before a declaration of the results, that you would put that aside for a petition. If wrongdoing is identified and proven. These issues were identified and petitioned before the declaration of the results after the results of the recount.
The recount.
And there was no prior declaration. So we had prior knowledge before we declared of these problems. I don't think the legislation envisaged that we would have that kind of recount. But our own argument is that the law provided for the recount. And so whilst that is not something that one could have anticipated, because that kind of recount is not written into our law. It was a recount that was done using a provision of the law which says in circumstances of difficulties, GCOM could take action. The action that GCOM took was to do a recount. And in doing that recount, GCOM specified a range of things it was going to do, which the CARICOM delegation said was not a mere recount, it was a forensic audit. That's in their report.
Yes.
It was a forensic audit. But yet, came down saying that here is the result of a recount and that there's nothing else to be done, bearing in mind that the information which we had accumulated, some of which has already been verified by the Chief Immigration Officer, was not made known to the CARICOM people. And therefore, in their report, they said that they had no information that would cause them to come up to a different conclusion. But the fact of the matter is that this information was sitting with GCOM before they completed their report, but it was never given to them. And therefore, their report reflects what they witnessed, but it didn't reflect the true situation because there was information available that could have made a difference. My contention is the legislators could never have intended that you could find all of these problems prior to the declaration and then legislate for the matter to be inquired into after a declaration. What the petitions in this country provides for is circumstances where there are contentions, but the need to prove those contentions, which can only occur after declaration, because in the first instance, the contentions have no validity if you don't have a declaration.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, it is for them to be contested, the petition. In this instance, the contentions have validity because of the evidence provided at the time prior to the declaration. And so, for me, a number of things went wrong. The application of the law, for me, went wrong. And if the law had been properly applied, then there are question marks as to whether what we declare is a true representation of the results of the elections 2020. And there were proposals as to how that could have been rectified, and those proposals were jettisoned.
Well, jettisoned. We are ready to go into another election, and none of those things, none of them has been addressed by GCOM, and that's really worrying thing. Vincent will keep watching what's going on, and we'll call upon you to update us on what's happening. Let's turn our attention to the recent results from the CSEC. You are, among many things, an educator. For a long time, you were the registrar at the University of Guyana. You taught there at the University of Guyana. and you were advisor to the Minister of Education under the coalition government. So, your education is one of your export areas. What's your assessment of the results from CSEC, especially the results in mathematics? And when you're finished with your assessment, the government seems to be rushing all over the place. You're hearing all kinds of stopgap measures that are being thrown out there every day. What do you think of those measures?
First of all, I don't think an assessment from me is required. The reason why I don't think an assessment from me is required is that the entire nation, president, all the stakeholders have accepted that we have a crisis in relation to the results of CXE and CSEC, and more particularly, the results of math and English. Nobody is any longer saying that there's improvement and things are getting better. Everybody has accepted to the point where the president has said that the CARICOM heads of government and heads of state will be addressing this matter. So the assessment has been done. What has occurred has occurred along a trajectory. I recall that during the 2015-2020 period, this issue came up, and the Ministry of Education sought to have an intervention to resolve this matter, and that there were some marginal improvements in subsequent years. So what is obvious is that we probably did not continue with those interventions that were started in 2016, 2017, and things have scaled back. So that's the first point I want to make, that recognizing this problem prior to now, under the Granger government, there were interventions that were put in place to seek to remedy the problem, mathematics specifically. In subsequent years, there was some indication of an improvement. I am not saying that the interventions were the best and the perfect interventions, but there was some indication of improvement. And that we are now where we're at is an indication that we have not continued to address the matter as we thought it should have been addressed during the Granger regime, and we are back to a crisis situation. But you know what, David? I am more concerned about the state of the education system and the fact that CSEC results do not speak to our population who should be doing CSEC. Imagine we have a problem with the results we're getting when only a fraction of those persons who should be doing CSEC are in fact doing CSEC. There's a large dropout rate in terms of the persons who should be doing CSEC. So this problem is deeper than the results of CSEC. This problem has to do with the state of the education system, which is not ensuring that our students come through to CSEC. And I think we have to address the problem at that global level, even as we may have intermediary interventions to deal with the results of CSEC. And you know, David, I'm saying this against a particular background. I'm hoping to do some work and to write on this matter for public consumption. But I have come across a school in this country where the entry into Form 1 may be about 40%. And by the time you get to Form 5, believe it or not, David, not more than 10 persons writing CSEC. Not more than 10 persons writing CSEC. Now, I can't say that that school is a sample.
Mhm.
It's certainly an indication of a bigger problem in terms of the performance of our education system in ensuring that those who have a right to free education are really enjoying that right, because the dropout rate is so high
So high, yeah.
that if we look at the real figures in terms of what the population is
Hmm.
and what the CSEC results are, we will see that the results are a minutiae of
Hmm.
those who should be sitting CSEC. There is a crisis in our education system. In the school that I'm referring to, you have students in Form 4 going into Form 5, and they can't perform better than a kindergarten student in terms of literacy and numeracy. But they are the beneficiaries of No Child Left Behind. And the schools are not geared for the remedial work because the secondary school teachers are not trained to do remedial work that is equivalent to the work that should have been done in the kindergarten and or the primary school. Our schools are in crisis. And I would really like the research to be done because I have a sneaking suspicion that for a number of sociological reasons, that the crisis is greater among the people of African descent. Because there's always been a tendency in societies for the certain urban areas to be affected in a manner that other areas are not affected. And the urban areas I'm referring to are largely populated by people of African descent. So that this problem may also have an ethnic dimension.
Hmm.
And like a
Hmm.
reflection of the fact that we are not paying attention to what the United Nations said to us when they declared the decade. And that is, there's need for a lot of institutional rectification in our society, a specific reference to the people of African descent. We continue to have this pretense that all is well and all are equal. But the UN have said to us, it's clearly written that there are a lot of institutional problems that have continued beyond independence, even though work has been done in many instances after independence to rectify the pre-independence colonial institutional problems that were not uh, to the benefit, that institutional problems that affected the citizens of the colony, and I dare say in this instance, to a large extent, people of African descent.
Vincent, I'm sitting here and and I can't help but say that we have a government now. I am doing some of my own work because, as an educator, I am concerned about this, and I've started to talk to teachers. The first teacher I talked to is teaching a class of 17, and this is in grade 2. I think it's grade 2, 6, 7 year olds, a class of 17. And that teacher told me of the 17, 7 of the children cannot read or write or recognize anything. They can't do nothing. They're just functionally and more than functionally literate. All right. Another 7 can do a little bit of reading, numeracy out, a little bit of reading. And only 3 of the 17 only 3 of the 17 can be said to be functionally literate in terms of reading and writing. And this is grade 2. All right? So 7 can't mambo at all, as we would say. Can't do nothing. All right? Can't form letters, can't read, can't count. Another 7 could barely read. And only 3 are up to where they're supposed to be. And of the 17, there's 16 African Guyanese in the class, 1 Indian Guyanese. And of the 3, it's the 1 Indian Guyanese and 2 African Guyanese of the 3 who can be said to be functionally literate. All right. This is directly. Because I want to have a sense. And that sample, if you can call it there, I think is consistent with what we are hearing in terms of literacy or illiteracy in our class. In fact, it may have exceeded the average because you're talking about 14 out of 17. You're talking about 7 out of 17 who can't do nothing at all. Talk to me.
David, there's nothing much more I can say about that. To say this, we iterate my earlier point. In that class of 17, which you spoke to, there are probably 17 other persons who are not going to school at all.
That's right.
Who should be in that class.
Exactly. I didn't get to that because I did ask the teacher, is 17, because I was surprised at the small class size. And the teacher told me, no. This is the 17 that come in. This is the 17 that come in. All right. So you're right. The other thing is that I ask what communication is there with the parents. All right. And the teacher told me, I communicate with the parents. But of the 17, only 3 parents are capable of helping their children at home. The other 14 who can't do nothing and who can barely do something, their parents are not capable. And in a lot of cases, they are young parents and females. They are
The
not.
other 14 are products of the system.
There you go.
They're products of the system. So they too are an indicator of the state of the system.
Yes.
And so the entire system, the entire society is in shambles. The entire society is in shambles. So let's look at another aspect of this. We have a society in which we say, well, we have economic growth. We have economic growth and we have this happening and that happening and all of that. But our manpower is not being prepared for whatever else is happening. And in fact, what is happening is that children are being prepared to be sanitation workers.
Mm-hmm.
When they leave school, all they could do is go and cut grass and clean trenches.
Yes.
And some of them may not want to do that, so they may do other things.
Other things in order to get by.
And so really all of these problems we're seeing in terms of what's happening in the population it's an outcome of the performance of our system with specific reference to social services and the education system in particular. And so you can build all the roads you want to build. You can even build all the schools you want to build. We are not addressing the question of our human resource development, which has to start from kindergarten right up to tertiary. And if we do not address the problems, 2 things will happen. We're going to have to do what we do and import workers from other societies. And you know, in importing those workers, we're probably depriving those other societies of their best.
Exactly.
It's a global problem. We're probably taking from some countries the people who are needed to help those countries. So we're importing people. and our people are being left behind in every regard and cannot be beneficiaries of the patrimony which belongs to them. We have to address the human resource problem, and it has to start, I humbly submit, from the kindergarten in the education system. But given the issues that we have mentioned about parents and all of that, we have to have supportive mechanisms, at least in the interim, to deal with those deficiencies. And we can't have a situation where a government comes in and there's an organization trying to do evening classes like we were doing in Sapphire.
Mm-hmm.
The government stops our funding. We can't fund the evening class. And then when we say, the government closed down the evening class, the Bank Minister says, we never funded it, so we didn't close it down.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, the closing down is a consequence of the action taken by government. And so that even in the face of attempts to deal with the problem, no matter how small they might be, some of the actions of government seeks to perpetuate the problem. So this is not now an omission of action, which you may relate to what's happening in the education system. This is action, commission, that all it does is to perpetuate the problem, which even if we were causing the government the worst of courses, here we were doing something for which the state has a responsibility that will address, no matter how small, the problem. And the government comes and dismantles it and then argues that they have not taken any negative actions, and the slide continues.
Yeah. And Vincent, I can hear the cynics who will say, well, the 17 persons that you referenced, David, 69 of them are Black people children. What are you all doing about it? Meaning what we Black leaders are doing about it. The fact of the matter, the responsibility for the education system lies with the government. Not with you, not with me, not with the Padre G, not with 1st of August movement. It lies not with the PNC or the PPP or AFC. It lies with the government of Guyana. And if you can have the presence of mind, or I can have the presence of mind with no resources, it is just our concern that said, let me look at some samples here. Let me trace 40 people from Form 1 and see what happens by the time they get to write an exam. Or I can call a teacher and say, tell me something about your class. How many students are there? You and I are doing it because we are concerned. And the government, which is supposed to be more concerned because they are charged with running the education system, not you, not me. And so they're going to tell us when it's Black people, children, and that is why when we say that there is an overt and covert plan, if you will, to keep Black people in their place, we are not out, because if the government is saying, well, what we are saying is wrong, there's no discrimination, they would wrap their minds around this problem and deal with it. I didn't want to get so worked up. Go ahead, Vincent.
David, you correctly said that they're cynics, and I know ministers of government who are among those. But for me to say that they're cynics is to afford them a certain level of recognition of their literacy. And I'm not saying they're illiterate, they're just cynics. But I say that to say that I sometimes would browse some social media groups, and they are government people who are not cynics. They say the same things, but they're not being cynical. It is an exhibition of their own functional illiteracy and their inability to do the analysis. So you have cynics on one hand, and you have some other victims of the system who, out of their state of ignorance, out of their illiteracy, are also making those statements.
I can say without any any fear of being objected to, that if Vincent Alexander has anything to do with education in this country, or if David Hines has anything to do with the education system in a formal way in this country, that we would be moving to deal with the problem in a holistic way, in an organic way, not because of our politics, but because we are so acutely aware that what education has done for the Vincent Alexanders and the David Hines of this world. I mean, if nothing else, it is just that knowledge that without access to the education that we have had, we would not even be speaking here today in public in a certain kind of way. And it is that concern that would drive any one of us, if we became, education minister, whatever the case may be, to deal with this problem in an urgent and incisive way. And you're wondering, Vincent, I'm so glad that you made that distinction between the cynics, because those are the nice ones, but the ones who are functionally illiterate, because they have to be, not to recognize that when a country like Guyana is in the state, its education system is in the state that it's in, we are badly off. We have never been builders of bridges, and that has never been what we have given to the world. Although we have built bridges, we have humanized the coast and so on. But as Rex Nettleford would argue, we have always given the world our minds. Our minds. And when you look at a situation where the minds of our people are being thrown to pasture, and we have now become a country that what we have to show the world are some bridges that will build now and break down in a year, roads that will build now and break up in a couple of months. That's what we know are showing the world rather than our minds. I'm flabbergasted, Vincent. I'm flabbergasted. Vincent, of you, when I came on the air just now, I got a message that they are displacing some other people in Moko to run some electrical thing and so on. You heard anything of that?
I have heard about that, but I do not have sufficient information to make an intelligent and informed comment.
Yes.
Matter that I heard about today, I'll be looking into it, and I will not want to be the one to make a comment until I'm properly informed.
Okay, yeah, I was in class all day today, and so didn't have a chance to peruse. I was coming, I got the messages there. Hopefully, I'll be able overnight to see what's happening there, and then cover it tomorrow. Vincent, the Ipadaji had a successful event. Professor Margarine Cars visited, and based on her book Blood on the River, about the 1763 revolution, and she gave a very incisive, I'm using that word again, account of what happened. And I heard this was from a GlobeSpan program last night. They were pointing to the fact that a lot of African Guyanese young people were in the audience, and that their interventions, their questions showed that they had more than a rudimentary sense of their history. The program over there was on the silencing of Indian history, and they were making the point that Indian young people are not so wedded to their history as African Guyanese young people, and they were making reference to the event that you put on and the fact that African Guyanese young people were asking informed questions and making informed comments. So, if based on the assessment by those on the other side, the event seemed to have touched the nerve in sections of the African Guyanese. What's your feedback since the event?
Well, I would say two things. If what they say is true, kudos to the African Guyanese. What they say is true, kudos to the African Guyanese. But I don't think that, I think that the average African Guyanese has a sense of where history has positioned him or her. I don't think that the average African Guyanese has the detailed information and are in the position to make the incisive analysis that would have come out of what Professor Cars did. So I think that their eyes are open, and Professor Carr provided information, and that to a large extent, this could well be a catalyst to our further delving into who we are from the standpoint of recognition of the people of African descent. But having said that, I wish to say if Padaji has called for the introduction of history, Chinese history, in our school system, not the social studies they do, which doesn't cover a lot of our reality. And that introduction has nothing to do specifically and only with the people of African descent. It has to do with the introduction of the history of Guyana and Guyanese and their contribution to Guyana's development. And therefore, those who made those statements should be prepared to join with us. The call of the introduction, the proper teaching of Guyanese history in our schools, objective teaching of Guyanese history in our schools, because if Padaji has been calling for it and has even formally written to ministers of education to have talks with them about that. And we have never been given the opportunity to have such a conversation with any minister. We did have some peripheral conversations under the Granger regime when they were doing curriculum reform. We were told that this matter would be looked into. That reform has been concluded. I dare say the matter has not been looked into. We were also told that this matter of the curriculum will be addressed at the level of CARICOM, and we're looking to see when that would occur and the manner in which it would occur. Because to a large extent, we are guided in terms of a curriculum by what comes out of CXC. And our argument here in Guyana was that whilst we should not abandon CXC, that history could be taught from Form 1 to Form 3 that is peculiar and specific to Guyana. And the history to go and get a pass will be taught in Form 4 and Form 5. So that there is a way in which we could continue to work with CSEC whilst we ensure that our problem is addressed. There's no difficulty in a student covering the syllabus for CSEC in Form 4 and Form 5. My own experiences, when I attended secondary school, in a system that was partly dysfunctional, I did British history from Form 1 to Form 4. It's only when I went to Christchurch in Form 5 that I covered the syllabus for West Indian history without lessons and passed. And I'm not in the top of the class, so I don't see why our system cannot facilitate teaching of Guyanese history from 1 to Form 3, and then taking on the CXC syllabus Form 4 to
On
Form
Form
5.
5. That
So
makes
you're not
sense.
doing away with anything. And
That's right.
may I go even further? I think there are ways in which history as an integrated subject, would be taught from kindergarten. It doesn't have to have the name history. But if we use the integrated approach to teaching, then much of what is in our history can be fed to us in the course of other subjects, be it even maths, even English, all of the other subjects. The integrated approach could afford us knowledge of our history, bearing in mind that the integrative approach is likely to be more impactful than the direct.
Vincent Alexander here. We're talking about a range of subjects here tonight. Vincent, any issue I didn't ask you about that you wanted to comment on?
Um, not really, except to say that Cars's visit exemplifies the approach of the Padaji to the issue of the decade, and that the issue of the decade has a lot to do with expending resources for empowerment of people. If we were to go back to a budget, you wouldn't see the money spent on car as money delivered to a community. And so you may say that the budget is lopsided because the community hasn't gotten the money. So much go to things like the car activity. But our contention is that the car activity is an empowerment activity that can awaken people, both in terms of substantial knowledge, in terms of their consciousness, and that is the base upon which other work has got to be done. If we don't have that level of knowledge and consciousness, even as we dispense resources in other areas, they will not be best spent because there's an element of superficial spending and superstructural spending on a non-existent base.
Vincent Alexander, thank you so much for coming on tonight and dealing with a range of subjects. We originally wanted to talk about just election, but we were able to stitch in some other issues. And your contribution, as usual, has helped to enrich our discourse and certainly put us on the road, straight and narrow way, as we try to navigate all the zigzags that this government is visiting upon us. Again, Vincent, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And to your audience, good night again. There's a lot for us to ponder, but more than ponder, a lot for us to begin to take proactive action on, because there is so much that it's one of the things about dealing with an authoritarian system, an autocratic system, and Bertie Ramcharan refers to it, is that it's layers and layers, all house pan all house, we see the big thing at the top, but then you get beneath it the rot beneath there. And that's what happens when you have a system that is rotten at the top. They try to nice themselves up. And then at the bottom, you go in there, the education system, the healthcare system, the problem of labor. You go in there and you see how our society is rotting before our very eyes. Only we, as a people, collective, all of us, African people, Indian people, Amerindian people, old people, young people, rich people, poor people, all of us have a responsibility to correct this mess because we are going down. As Martin Carter says, all are in food, all are consumed. See you all tomorrow night. Hopefully, we'll get more word on what we are hearing in Moko, whether it's true or not. Hopefully, we'll be able to cover that tomorrow night. See you all.